going on, everybody? Welcome to the latest episode of our new podcast, Mass Media Hysteria. I'm your host. My name is Court. With me, as always, is Chris.
How's it going, everyone?
Andris is not here this week. He will be back next week. You may have noticed we didn't do a show last week because there was literally nothing to talk about. So we took the weekend off, but we are back. I do want to say very quickly, of course, you can watch this podcast in video form here on YouTube on my channel, but now we also have audio versions of all the podcasts up on various podcasting apps, Google Podcasts, Spotify, a couple others, and we're going to be trying to roll them out to a couple more like Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, stuff like that. That's coming. But if you want to check out the audio only version that you can download and take with you, feel free to go do that. And of course, we would love it if you would hit the like button on this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, ring the bell, you know, the YouTube stuff. And of course, hit the comments below with any thoughts you have on these topics. I read all of the comments. I try and respond to them all, doing all that stuff. It really helps the channel grow and get the show out there. So we really appreciate that very much. So the show today, we've got a few topics that we're going to talk about. We are going to talk about the fact that Marvel's Eternals and Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, is that it? Mm-hmm. It's looking like those two movies may not play in cinemas in China. We'll talk about why that might be. We are going to talk a couple of movie trailers. We have The Green Knight, the new David Lowery film, and the Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard, which is the sequel, of course, to the Hitman's Bodyguard. We're going to talk about Rian Johnson's upcoming Knives Out 2 has added a few people to the cast. I think it's shaping up really nicely. And then the big part of the show that we'll finish on is we're going to do a full spoilers review of The Woman in the Window, which is streaming on Netflix now. If you don't want to be spoiled for that, I do have a spoiler-free review up on my channel. I'll put the card up there somewhere. But that is what we're going to talk about. So shall we start with the news about Marvel? Are you into that?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. So it came out a couple days ago in Variety that, again, like I said, these two movies may not be available. They may not be allowed by the government to screen in China. And of course, this is kind of a big deal because China is the second largest film market in the world after North America. So of course, that means a lot of box office money would be lost for Disney and Marvel. My understanding, I don't know if you're aware of this or if you have better information, Chris, but my understanding is generally in North America, the studios get about 2/3 of the box office revenue of any of their movies, whereas when they screen in China, they only get about 25%. So it's not going to be, it won't be the end of the world if these movies don't go there. I think Marvel will probably be just fine, but it still would be a significant hit to the overall box office. But so what we're reading, it's two separate issues. From Marvel's Eternals, which of course is directed by Chloe Zhao, who just won Best Director and Best Picture at the Academy Awards for her film Nomadland, which is a fabulous movie. Mm-hmm. She was born in China. I believe she grew up in China. Now she's over here. Excuse me. Apparently, and I couldn't actually find the comments that she made, but apparently she's made some disparaging comments about the Chinese government, and so now they're saying, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Apparently, the sort of film board in China released like the slate of movies that are going to come out, and Eternals and Shang-Chi were not on there. Mm-hmm. So it's undecided as of yet. It's not a certainty that they won't come out there. I don't think it's been decided. But when it comes to Eternals, my understanding, and if you've got anything to back this up, but my understanding is Chloe Zhao has said some disparaging remarks about the Chinese government. They didn't like that. And apparently during the Oscars, they basically did a media blackout of her win. They kind of just buried that news. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on this, Chris?
Yeah, it's this is pretty big, pretty big and kind of surprising and could be bad news for Marvel, especially going forward. Even though that I don't have the specifics percentage numbers in front of me of how much, let's say, the studio would be able to keep percentage wise of the box office from China, but even let's say it's 25%. That's that's a big deal. Seriously, I mean, because China is the second largest box office market in the world. At the moment, it's probably the biggest one, just because compared to the movies that have come out and been released in North America, just in 2020 alone, the box office wise has paled in comparison to the Chinese box office, which is still actually thriving at the moment. They've had several high profile movies, like one is called Detective China. I think it's Detective Chinatown 3, and that's like a sequel and a long running series in China, a comedy action series, and that's made like $600 million just in China alone. And a lot of people don't talk about it because they're more kind of focused on localized box office. The point being, though, is that even with just like a percentage of, let's say, 25% of the receipts that Marvel could potentially receive from that market, that's a lot. I mean, because Marvel movies are typically huge in China, so you're talking about losing out on upwards of hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right.
So that's a big blow. And yeah, like you're saying, there's a kind of two separate issues. One when it comes to Eternals, and one that comes to Shang-Chi, to pronounce it correctly. And yeah, to focus on the Eternals one first off, it's a bummer, and it kind of just shows how kind of nebulous and how the relationship between America and China are in terms of kind of media. And when you mentioned that, like, oh, Chloe Zhao made disparaging comments about China, if you actually were to see her comments, it's like, I don't know, I feel like it's something that, like, to Western audiences, it'd be like, oh, that bad? Like, she is something that really, seemed to piss off the Chinese censors, was that Chloe Zhao identified herself as American first. Like, she was like, she was born in China, but I believe that she in interviews, she was like, yeah, I just consider myself American. I'm an American now. And sort of nationalism is a very strong virtue within China and within
Right.
the Chinese government. So although they're okay with in theory with having their kind of Chinese superstars or Chinese artists and actors and directors go off and do other stuff in other countries, they still want it to be under the guise that it's like, you are a Chinese filmmaker first and foremost. So sort of Chloe Zhao aligning herself with the United States didn't please him too well. So for that, I mean, other things that she has said has kind of furthered and distanced herself from the Chinese government, and they're pissed at it, and they're pissed at her, and they're kind of, like you mentioned, they had a media blackout when it came to her just kind of winning the Academy Awards, which in any other situation, I feel like would have been celebrated by the media there as kind of like, hey, local hero, yada yada.
Sure.
Yeah, it's strange. I don't know. When it comes to Eternals, I think it might be done. I don't know what kind of comeback Chloe Zhao can have from this. I mean, they don't, the censors in China don't seem to mess around. I could really see them kind of holding this grudge, especially because it's not like a year away. It's not. I don't even think it's 6 months away. Like, Eternals is coming pretty soon.
Yeah.
And I don't think that enough kind of damage is going to be repaired for them to let Eternals release there. Do you kind of agree? Do you think that they might be able to to hash something out for Eternals specifically?
I don't really know. I mean, I don't know too much about how all this kind of stuff works, but I don't know. If I think if the censor board in China has a very specific issue with Chloe Zhao, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Like, they're not gonna take her name off the movie. So
yeah. So yeah, that's a good point. So that's why I think, like, if there was more time, maybe Chloe Zhao could do some like butt kissing on behest of Marvel, because I know Marvel doesn't want to miss out on that cheddar. But also, I think that they also respect Chloe Zhao enough as an artist and a filmmaker to be like, I mean, she didn't. From an American perspective, she didn't say anything crazy inflammatory or crazy like offensive. It was just more like, well, you dug a grave for yourself. So yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if Eternals doesn't get released there. Shang-Chi though is kind of in the maybe zone, and that's
Well, and
different.
let me just jump
Okay.
in just really quick. I think also, I'm sure Marvel, when the marketing really starts ramping up for Eternals, they're going to be wanting to talk Chloe Zhao all the
Yeah.
time, like
Oh,
Academy Award winning
uh,
director, you know. So yeah, sorry. Anyway, go on. You were talking about
no.
Shang-Chi.
That's a great point. It's definitely not a director that they're going to throw under the bus.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to protect her, and I think that they're definitely not going to be like a one and done with her, especially if Eternals does well commercially and critically in other markets. I think that Marvel's going to be in the Chloe Zhao business for a while.
Yeah.
Shang-Chi, on the other hand, I think it's possible. It's kind of like, I wouldn't say 50-50, but it's kind of walking this tightrope, and it's for different reasons. So unlike Eternals, Shang-Chi doesn't have essentially somebody that's been bad mouthing the government or anything like that. It's more about the project in its entirety that China is kind of having reservations on it. According to an article from Variety, this is where I'm getting most of my information of some of the things that are kind of like looming over the release of Shang-Chi is um, people being upset with the history of the character in the comics. One in that regard is the character of Fu Manchu, which essentially they kind of scrubbed the character and they changed it to being the Mandarin. And the comics, the original comics, apparently Fu Manchu was the father of Shang-Chi. And so they're kind of changing that. So it's like, oh, it's the Mandarin is the father of him. But there's, because of that, even though it was, decades ago, there's still this feeling of racial stereotypes that are associated with this comic book character. In unlike kind of the stuff that's going with Chloe Zhao, I can kind of understand it more. This, from my reading, and I don't know if you've read anything differently, the difference between the Shang-Chi and Eternals situation is that Eternals, Chloe Zhao seemed to upset like the government, where Shang-Chi seems to have negative public perception
Yeah.
in China, where people are like, this seems kind of racist. It seems maybe not racist, but it seems like a stereotype. I mean, he had a Fu Manchu origin. Not only that, they talk about essentially like, oh, it just seems like it's all about, obviously it's all about kung fu, and it's they say like the overuse of the color red, which they feel is kind of like a westernized look or stereotype of like, this is what China is, red, blah blah blah.
Right.
And that one, it simultaneously makes me think that it's like, because it's just public perception, I think that it could potentially still receive the green light from the censor board in China. But I feel like any hopes of it being a box office hit in China might be kind of like sinking. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, well, let me bring up a quote, because there was somebody wrote on something called Weibo, which I didn't know what that was, but it's like apparently a Chinese like microblogging site.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a very popular social media site in China.
Okay. So what this one person wrote, so you change the name and it's not Fu Manchu anymore. The Mandarin is inherently a character that blackens the image of the Chinese people. I hope China Film and the censorship authorities won't be bought out by this. This kind of film is not worthy of coming to China to make money off us while calling us fools. Pretty harsh words. My thought is, though, like, you haven't seen the movie yet.
Yeah.
I think probably what is gonna have to, what I would imagine would happen is, at least for international marketing, I think Marvel is gonna start changing the way they're gonna promote this film.
Mm-hmm.
Presumably if the film isn't super stereotypical, if they do come to these characters with tact and truisms and what have you, I think the marketing, at least the international marketing, will start to reflect that, to maybe at least sort of gauge how people in China are feeling about it. I could see them doing, sometimes movies will put out like a 7-minute scene or something. I could see them doing that on YouTube or what have you, for a scene that really does sort of go into that kind of stuff. Would you think that might be a a direction they would go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that they're going to, all hands on deck right now, essentially to market Shang-Chi in a favorable light with China. Because, like I said, if I were to bet, I'd say it will get released. So now it's just a matter of how do we make this accessible? A recent example, and obviously this came out during the pandemic, so it was never going to make as much money as it could have prior. But the recent Mulan, that was live action, the Mulan that was released in China, was not warmly received for similar scenarios. I mean, one that also had kind of a controversy in regarding the main star and comments that she made about the government, yada yada. But essentially, and this is something I can understand, even just being a white American dude, is that essentially Chinese audiences in the Chinese market are open to Western films. Like, they love Marvel movies, love Fast and Furious movies. They are open to Western films. They do not give a shit, seemingly, and I don't really blame them, of seeing a westernized version of Chinese culture.
Right.
They don't really care. And I can't fault them. And like I said, I'm not, well versed in either Eastern. I'm not well versed in Chinese American culture, and I'm not well versed in just Chinese culture. So I wouldn't be able to tell you like the minutia of the difference between like, oh, well, that's very Chinese American or that's very Chinese.
Right.
But at the same time, I think that it's, from watching a lot of world cinema and watching a lot of films from Hong Kong and from mainland China, and then watching movies like Mulan and stuff like that, you really can kind of just see like, oh yeah, this one feels authentic and true, and the other feels like everyone playing dress up, even if they cast correctly, even if they, everybody's cast and they're actually either Chinese or from Hong Kong or Eastern Asian. It doesn't matter. It's still like, it still kind of feels like everyone's playing dress up a bit. And I think that's a hurdle that I'm not sure if Shang-Chi can clear without having seen the film. I don't know if it will kind of like bridge that gap of feeling just like a Western imitation of Chinese culture.
Well, and I mean, I'm sure it's still going to feel very much like a Marvel movie too, right?
Yeah.
So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, so I guess we'll have to see. I believe Eternals comes out in September, and I think Shang-Chi is December.
Flip it.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so Shang-Chi comes out first in September, and then Eternals is November.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So yeah, whatever you guys think about that, what do you jump into the comments? Let us know what you're feeling about it.
Mm.
And we will move on. So let's talk about Knives Out 2.
Ooh.
So Rian Johnson is returning to write and direct the sequel, and I'll be the first to say I loved the first one. I think it's a great movie.
Absolutely.
It proved to us that Christopher Plummer was hilarious, I should say, but
yeah,
that was kind of one of my big, because I've always known him as like a dramatic actor, and he was really funny in that movie.
Yeah.
But so Knives Out 2 is happening, and Rian Johnson has just announced a few more people who are going to be part of the cast. Of course, Daniel Craig will be returning as the main character, Foghorn Leghorn. That's not his name. I forget his name, but
Benoit Blanc.
That's
Detective Benoit Blanc.
Yes, fantastic. So he'll be returning. They've also added now Dave Bautista, which I think is great because he's got really solid comic sensibilities. Of course, Drax in the Guardians and the Marvel movies. Speaking of which, and did you see Stuber?
No, I didn't see Stuber.
Everyone hated Stuber. I laughed myself silly in that movie. He was very funny, and Kumail Nanjiani, who of course
is great.
Eternals. But so Dave Bautista is joining. Janelle Monae. I don't know that much about Janelle Monae, but cool. Edward Norton. And
Kathryn Hahn.
Kathryn Hahn, thank you. Just why don't you just give me your initial impression of this cast?
I mean, so far, fantastic. I'm all on board. Like you, I really enjoyed the original Knives Out. It was just it's a movie kind of right up my alley. I've always been a massive fan of kind of Agatha Christie novels, and the classic whodunit. It's really like that, and along with film noir is kind of like my favorite kind of genre. I could watch that and eat that up all day. And I thought Rian Johnson did a great job of putting his own little spin on it. And something that was to be expected about with the upcoming sequels. I think that everybody talked about, considering that it's following in the tradition of an Agatha Christie novel. Essentially, is you're going to follow the detective when he goes from different case to different case, and as was true with the first one, which had a fantastic all-star cast. You know, Jamie Lee Curtis, Don Johnson, Michael Shannon, Chris Evans, Toni Collette. So I think everybody was, in addition to seeing like, okay, what's the next adventure that Benoit Blanc goes up against, or was also the anticipation of what's that cast going to be like.
Yeah.
We knew, and I think that Rian Johnson also knew, and he wanted to kind of up the ante. And so far, I'm stoked. I mean, one, it's like you look at the four actors that they've cast right now, all of them are very different, like, you know, come from different backgrounds, different sensibilities. And all of them are intriguing in different ways. Like Dave Bautista, you know, came from a world of wrestling, really broke onto the scene with Guardians of the Galaxy, proved himself to be a really terrific comedic actor, but he's always talked in interviews like he really has genuine aspirations of being a legitimately respected dramatic actor, which I think he has the chops. I think we've seen shades of it. We've seen it in a little bit in Blade Runner. He had a small part there. And so I'm all for him getting more roles that kind of give him a bit more meat. Janelle Monae has been in a few films. She's also a singer. She's a musician, really, really talented. And I'm excited to see what she does. She's another one of those kind of like transitioning from music into film. And even though she's had other roles, I'm still waiting for like a big kind of breakout role where, you know, where you could just associate her as like, oh yeah, Kathryn Hahn, who we just were singing the praises of during WandaVision. So I'm always happy to see her get work. And Edward Norton, who has, as of recently, kind of developed a bit of a stigma as difficult to work with, which is not something you want to have as an actor in Hollywood. However, I think anybody can agree that the dude's great. He is a really, really phenomenal actor. And I'm hoping, I mean, Rian Johnson worked with Bruce Willis in the past with Looper. Bruce Willis, also a notoriously difficult actor to work with on set. So I think maybe just something about Johnson's personality, his the way that he communicates with people. I think that he's not going to have an issue, and I think that he can really bring the best out of all these people. So I'm stoked. I'm really excited, even just with these initial castings, and it's only 4 people. And, you know, considering how big the cast was for the original Knives Out, I'm just kind of like sitting here salivating with like, who else are they going to get? Because it's so random. It's not like there's not a clear issue, like a clear answer. It's kind of like, who the hell else is going to be a part of this wacky cast?
And I mean, if it's anything like the first one, it's going to be a real like ensemble piece, right? So all of these people bringing very different sensibilities could really round it out, I think, very nicely. And on to Ed Norton's credit too, people don't often talk about this because he's dramatic actor guy, but he's a funny dude. Like he's got comedic chops. I mean, if you you've ever seen him host Saturday Night Live, he's a great impressionist. Not that he's going to be doing impressions in this movie, but even you know, like Death to Smoochie is a movie that I love, and he's quite funny in that. So I think this is a really good start for this cast, and I'm looking forward to it, man.
One last question. Do you think, because although there were, you know, really big names in the original Knives Out, there were also like, you know, it was kind of a tier of like the big celebrities, if that makes any sense. Do you think that these 4 are going to be the biggest names in it? Or do you think that there's going to be like even another shocker of like, oh crap, they got this person? Do you know what I mean by that?
I think there will be some more big names. Yeah, like I would say like of these 4, Edward Norton is probably the biggest name. And I think, you know, almost everybody enjoyed Knives Out. Not so much The Last Jedi, but I think Rian Johnson has a lot of goodwill towards him in Hollywood right now. I think a lot of people really want to work with the guy. And to your point about him, just the way he communicates, like if you see him in interviews, he's an incredibly easygoing dude. And it looks, I've seen interviews with some of the cast Knives Out, and they said like it was just fun on set every day. Like everyone was having a good time. So, and what more could you want as an actor? Like to go to work every day, have a good time, and then have it be a good movie that everyone
Oh yeah,
enjoys, right?
exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, man, I'm into it.
I'm stoked. Yeah, I
Yeah,
can't wait. Also, it's that that crazy, what is it, like the $450 million price tag for two
yeah,
movies. Kind of,
for Netflix. Yep.
yeah. I mean, we kind of like gawked at it a little bit, but also now considering like how many people are going to be in this movie and then the sequel, which is probably going to have an entirely different cast as well.
Yep.
I could see that 450 going by pretty quick. You know what I
Right.
mean, with all the talent they're getting. But yeah, man, I'm really excited.
Right on. Okay, so let's move on. We're going to talk about a couple trailers here. We're going to talk about The Green Knight. We are going to talk about The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. Let's start with The Green Knight. I saw it a couple days ago, rewatched it today. This is by filmmaker David Lowery. More on him in a minute. But Chris, why don't you give me just your sort of overall first impressions of the trailer?
First off, yeah, The Green Knight's actually been on my radar for quite a bit. This was one of those movies from A24, which is probably one of the few movie studios, kind of independent studios working today, where if I just see the logo, I'm like, okay, I'm interested.
Yep.
Because they've been knocking it out of the park left and right.
Their track record's really impressive.
Yeah, if you just look up A24 films, and I guarantee they really focus on visionary director kind of created works.
A lot of genre stuff too.
Yeah, so this has been on my radar, and I was bummed that it got pushed back so far, but glad that it's being brought finally getting a release date. And yeah, this trailer is even wilder and weirder and more of what I wanted from everything else that I've seen prior. Because we've seen like an earlier teaser trailer that kind of introduced us into this world. Essentially, this is a kind of a newer take on an Arthurian legend, and essentially it's this medieval fantasy adventure, but it's done in, it looks like it takes that kind of trappings that we've seen before, like I said, medieval fantasy, but it's doing it in such a unique and kind of stylistic way. And that's what's really interesting to me. Like visually, I think this movie looks stunning. It has some terrifically weird imagery. There's a moment where he kind of climbs up to like a mountaintop, and you just see these giant tall people just kind of strolling through. There's a talking fox. There's some weird shit going on, and I'm for it. It's that kind of, like you mentioned, genre stuff that A24 does that gets me all giddy inside. Like the Lighthouse, the year it came out, 2019, was one of my favorite movies, precisely because it was just this weird, visually gorgeous, wacky kind of movie that you don't see from anything else. So I've been all in on this, and I think that David Lowery, which we could probably talk about more, is a really interesting filmmaker. I'll touch on his filmography in a bit, but I want to get your thoughts on the trailer.
Really like this trailer. I think it visually looks absolutely stunning. That creature, the Green Knight, who's kind of part tree or something like that, looks very practical to me. I got a very distinct like Pan's Labyrinth vibe from this trailer. I don't imagine it's going to be that dark and freaky, but like just from the particularly that one character that really came across. Although I imagine it's not Doug Jones. I like the cast. The colors, it looks really cool. I'm not familiar with the legend itself, so I don't really know much about that. My one big thing, and I believe I've only seen one Mike Lowery movie, and this really gives me pause, was A Ghost Story. Did you see A Ghost Story? I hated that movie.
Okay.
I thought that movie was just the most self-indulgent, wank fest, pretentious. Maybe I didn't get it, I don't know. And I like weird little movies like that. And I thought I remember seeing the trailer for that movie and being like, this is my kind of movie. And then the woman eats a pie with no dialogue for like 7 minutes straight, and it was ridiculous, and I hated that movie. So, but this looks so different in every way. I'm psyched for it. What do you think about the oeuvre of Mike Lowery?
I like him. I think A Ghost Story is quite good. It's definitely intentional. I didn't find it to be pretentious. I don't really. I mean, dude, just you see my Instagram page. You know that I watch pretentious art house movies or what I dig. So
Right.
so like so I dig it. I could see where you're coming from with that. Especially if you're kind of going in to any movie with wanting to kind of like wanting it to have not a traditional narrative but like a traditional narrative structure. Yeah, and someone eating pie for 7 minutes straight with like in a single take is not everyone's idea of a good time. But what I will say, part of what I enjoyed about that film and some of his other work is that he is really, I think he's trying to do things that are slightly different in off kilter. And on here's what I want to talk about is oeuvre, is because it is very strange. Like he'll bounce back and forth from really like art house kind of out there weird sort of independent films, and then he did fucking Pete's Dragon, and then he did The Old Man and the Gun with Robert Redford, which was a pretty like it was an okay movie. It wasn't bad, but it was a pretty like straightforward kind of like comedy crime caper, totally different from a ghost story. And after the Green Knight, he's going to be doing an adaptation of Peter Pan and Wendy for Disney, and that's what I think I find fascinating is that although the Green Knight seems closest to a ghost story as far as like the rest of his filmography, and just of how they seem idiosyncratic and they seem very visually stunning. I think what's exciting is that this guy can't be pegged down. Like
Right.
there's not like like, oh, this guy does this kind of movie, he only does this. And that's what's exciting for me. I think that even if someone like just hated a ghost story, I think looking at his other work, it's like, oh well, he doesn't just do a ghost story. This dude's really kind of trying, like he's really just fucking throwing everything in the kitchen sink and saying like what works. Oh, is it a crime caper? Is it like a romantic drama? Is it a kids movie? So I'm stoked for the Green Knight. I you'll probably disagree, but I personally hope that it does get as just weird and like a just shrug at the end of it, the same way that a ghost story was. Like I hope it's just like the talking fox turns into an eagle and then it dies and then everybody burns up and it's amazing. I'm like, art cinema. No, I'm for it. I love what, go ahead.
No, I hope it gets weird too. I hope it gets weird and dark, and yeah, for sure.
Right. But yeah, no, so I think we're both in agreement. It looks good. Anything else you want to say about this one in particular?
I keep hitting my microphone. I like the cast. You've got Dev Patel in there. You have
Oh yeah.
Joel Edgerton, who I'm going to say this until they make this freaking movie. But at some point, they got to make a movie about Conan O'Brien, and it has to be played by Joel Edgerton. Just saying, that's it. So he's in there.
A hunky Conan O'Brien.
Yeah,
I
totally.
can kind of see it as, now that I'm looking at him. I have his IMDb pulled up. I can kind of see it. He's like Conan O'Brien if he had machismo.
Right.
Like
If you give him the wig and dress him in clothes that make him look kind of taller and more slender and not as like built, I think it would work.
yeah.
But yeah, so you got Dev Patel, you got him, Erin Kellyman, who we've been talking about as Carly in Falcon Winter Soldier. She's in there.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I'm very curious about this movie. I really hope I'm able to see it in theaters. That would be really nice.
Yeah. Me too.
So, and of course, in the comments, let us know if you are looking forward to this movie, and we will move on to The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard, which of course is the sequel to The Hitman's Bodyguard from a couple of years ago. You've got Ryan Reynolds, Sam Jackson, Salma Hayek. In this sequel, now we have Antonio Banderas.
Mhm.
I watched the trailer today. I'll say this: I enjoyed the first movie. It was fun. It was exactly what it was supposed to be. What I found interesting about the first one is that, Ryan Reynolds has really made a name for himself, and he's a good actor. If you've ever seen like Buried, he's really good. He's very talented, but he really has made a name for himself as a comedic actor. He's a very, very funny guy.
Mhm.
And the weird thing about The Hitman's Bodyguard was it was kind of a two-hander between him and Samuel L. Jackson. He was kind of the straight man in the movie. Sam Jackson was kind of a little bit more the comic relief.
Yeah.
And I got from this trailer, I got the impression that they're maybe both playing a little bit of double duty. Like I think maybe Ryan Reynolds is going to be doing a little bit more comedy, but I thought it looked like a lot of fun. And one thing that really stood out to me, I haven't like thought about this, but the trailer had a narrator. That's not something we've seen in quite a while. Usually it's
Yeah.
just text on the screen and it's like, in a world. The guy didn't say in a world, but
Yeah.
it was like, so and so is a bodyguard for that. I was just like, that is not something I've heard in quite a long time.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, no, it felt like it definitely felt like a throwback to like 90s style trailer, especially since this is kind of, it's not a buddy cop, but it's buddy action comedy. So it felt appropriate. I dug that.
Yeah. What did you think about the trailer overall?
I thought it was good. I'm similar to you. I thought the first one was kind of like fun entertainment. It was light. I guess the only real complaint I had with it is that it wasn't as funny as I wanted it to be. And I went in not expecting it to be like amazing or anything, but I was like, I mean, I love Ryan Reynolds, and I thought like, yeah, him pairing him with Samuel L. Jackson, that's ripe for really good comedic moments. And there were some solid laughs in it, but it was just kind of like the entire time I was watching, especially by the end of it, I was like, I feel like this should be funnier. Like it seems like they were so excited to get the cast together and them riffing off each other that they didn't really, there was more to be mined from the comedy. So I was open to the idea of a sequel. I was not clamoring for one. And the sequel looks like a sequel. It looks like kind of more of the same. So I definitely would be interested in checking this out. I would probably rent it. I at the moment, unless I hear really great word of mouth that it's like this is better than the first, I probably am not going to rush out to go see this in theaters. But I would definitely check it out. If even if it's on par with the first one, then hey man, that's like a fun Friday night or whatever. You know what I mean? Like have a couple of drinks watching it, and like I did with the first one. And I think it'll be a good time because I mean everyone's just so likable. Ryan Reynolds, Salma Hayek, who doesn't age, she's a vampire. And Samuel L. Jackson is fantastic. Antonio Banderas, I love him. Like it's that kind of movie where even when I was watching the trailer, I wasn't like laughing, but I was just I just had a nice smile on my face of like, yeah, this looks like it's just gorgeous, entertaining people doing funny, at least semi-funny things. And it's, yeah, looks like a good time.
There was one moment in the first movie that it was the funniest part of the movie for me. They're in like a van with a bunch of nuns, and the nuns are all singing, and like Ryan Reynolds is like completely just like frustrated, whatever. And Sam Jackson's like singing with the nuns, and he's super into it. That had me howling. That was amazing.
It had some solid laughs in it for sure. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to move on to sort of our big main topic. This is what we'll do for the rest of the show. We are going to do a spoilers review of the new Netflix movie. Came out on Friday, and this podcast will be going up on Monday, so it's still kind of new,
brand new.
The Woman in the Window with Amy Adams and some other people. Again, there is a spoiler-free review on my channel, which you can check out. This movie is an interesting story because I believe it was shot in 2018. It was supposed to come out in 2019. It's based on the novel of the same name by an author named AJ Finn. I have not read the book. I've heard it's really good. But they shot the movie, and this was actually shot at 20th Century Fox before that was sold to Disney. They showed it to some test audiences. Test audiences didn't get it. They were very confused by it, so they decided to go and do reshoots, during which time the whole Disney-Fox merger happened. They did some reshoots. Then, of course, COVID hit. It just kept getting pushed off. And then I guess Disney decided to just sell it off to Netflix. Before we get into spoilers, Chris, do you want to give me your sort of overall impressions of the movie? Or what did you think about it going into it?
Yeah, I remember hearing about this movie a while ago. Like you said, it was technically supposed to come out in 2019, and
I think there were trailers going back that far because I remember seeing the trailer like a long time ago.
Yeah, me too. And then it was supposed to come out in 2020, and so I was kind of interested right off the bat when I saw the trailer or kind of read the synopsis and heard the freaking title. I was like, okay, this is Gone Girl. It's, I mean, not specifically Gone Girl, but it's of that. There's like a subgenre and that It's a Gone Girl, The Girl on the Train, Sharp Objects, which was a miniseries that also starred Amy Adams. It's of that kind of like woman-led or female-led thriller kind of murder mystery with an unreliable narrator kind of stuff. So I'm not a huge fan of that kind of subgenre, just because pretty much the only one that I thought was worth watching was Gone Girl. The other ones I felt like were all kind of like very similar and like kind of let me down. So I wasn't really expecting too much. The one kind of ray of hope that I had was that it was directed by Joe Wright, and I was like, hey man, Joe Wright is a really good director. I mean, Atonement is fantastic, and he's had a solid track record. Even The Darkest Hour, which some people got some mixed reviews, but I thought was like, it's still a solid effort. So I thought we were in good hands. And this movie sucked, man. Like I never like to just shit on a movie. I really don't, because I understand it's extremely hard to make for filmmaking is extremely hard. Yeah. And it's extremely hard to make any movie regardless of its quality. And so I'm not just kind of like poo on anybody, just like work.
Well, and hundreds of people put blood, sweat, and tears into it. Yeah, I always feel bad when I give a negative review.
Yeah. But at the same time, I just got to be honest. I thought this was quite bad. This was a fascinating major misstep for Joe Wright. I don't know what went wrong. Those are my initial thoughts.
And yeah, so when I had suggested that maybe we review it on the show, you had said, it's been pushed back, and then the review embargo doesn't lift until the day of, and I was like, yeah. Well, I said this in the spoiler-free review, because when I checked it, I think it had like 32% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's really bad. Mm-hmm. And I was like 40 minutes into this movie, and I was like, I don't understand why. Like, I do think there's a lot of upside to the movie, and that's why this movie frustrated me so much, because I was really enjoying it for a time there. And then it just falls apart so hard in the third act. But like leading up to that, Amy Adams is great in this film. I thought what little screen time she has, I thought Julianne Moore was really good. Mm-hmm. I liked Gary Oldman. He was very menacing. He gets like downright scary in a couple moments in this movie. And I thought it was shot brilliantly. Like the visual language of this movie, particularly this scene where, so it should be said that this is very much inspired by Hitchcock's Rear Window. She's an agoraphobic.
What gave that away?
The entire film.
Was it the fact that it showed Jimmy Stewart from Rear Window within the first 3 seconds?
That's right. Continue. That's true. I forgot about that. And that was a little much. Yeah. But yeah, so Amy Adams plays Anna. She's a child psychologist. She's an agoraphobic. She had been in a traumatic car accident, which then sort of caused her to not be able to go outside. And she spends her days taking her meds, drinking too much wine, looking out the window and kind of watching her neighbors. Mm-hmm. New neighbors move in. She meets the mom, or so we think. And then she sees the mom, or so we think, get stabbed to death. And there's a moment where she tries to force herself out of the house to run over and try and do something. Mm-hmm. And the way that scene was shot, I thought was amazing, because the way the camera's moving, the way it's cut, it's specifically designed to make us feel really disoriented, to put us into her mindset. She's using like an umbrella almost as like a talisman or something to keep her safe. It actually made me think of Chuck McGill in Better Call Saul with the space blanket wrapped around him when he has to go outside. There's a lot of that kind of stuff in the movie that's really cool. And the way he shoots that big sort of cavernous stairwell in her house, which straight up lets you know that something's going to happen with the stairs at the end. But all that was great. And then the third act, and I will say, I thought some of the dialogue was not great, but then the third act happens and it just gets so ridiculous. And we find out that, I've been talking for a while. Why don't you jump in?
Well, this is where we differ or disagree kind of greatly, because I pegged this movie for what it was like 5 minutes in.
Yep.
I think that I I none of it worked. None of it worked for me. I think that I think the acting wasn't very good. I think that Amy Adams was I think she's a terrific actress. She was just way all over the place, and I don't blame her. I blame the direction. I blame Joe Wright. The tone was never consistent. It completely just veered like wildly in between camp and thriller, and I was like, what is the tone here? Is this supposed to be uh do you mind if we just go into spoilers now? Do we
Yeah,
want to like okay, so
go for
spoilers
it.
ahead. So there, just to jump around just a bit before I kind of bring it back, is that there's a moment towards the end when the actual killer, who's revealed to be Ethan, and I'll get to that, is kind of chasing her, and it has like these like these crazy kind of strings going on,
Mhm.
and she's running up, and the camera's following her, and she holds on to the banisters of the stairs and screams. And I was like, I get what you're trying to go for. It's supposed to be like this kind of classic Hollywood Hitchcockian style thriller where it would have similar style orchestral music at this moment of just like crazy strings, and it's almost histrionic and just like the acting, but it doesn't work because it's never consistent. This film like is it simultaneously like is dying to be this homage and this loving tribute to all these like Hitchcock films and these thrillers from like the 40s and 50s and even 60s to an extent, but at the same time it doesn't have it neither commits fully to being an homage nor does it have its own identity.
Right.
And because of that, everything suffered. The one I Like I said, Amy Adams is a terrific actress. She is. I think that her performance was really uneven. Gary Oldman is at one level here. I
Yeah.
couldn't find him menacing because every time he came in, I was just laughing. And I love Gary Oldman, but he was at 11 from every scene, so that didn't work. Um, what the fuck? We're up with the detectives. That was like a stupid Abbott and Costello routine where
Yeah.
they were finishing each other's sentences.
Mhm.
Again, I'm like, I don't know what the tone is.
And I really like Brian Tyree Henry too, but
Oh, me too. Yeah, none of these people are bad actors at all. It's just I think it was just direction. I really think that these actors had no idea what movie they were in because Joe Wright had no idea what movie they were in. Wyatt Russell, I also thought was inconsistent. I thought he started off really good, but again, he became this just for the sake of being a red herring. He became just this wildly over the top character. Jennifer Jason Leigh is in this movie, and I did not know that was her until I saw the credits.
okay.
That's nothing to mark her, but she had like two lines. The only one that actually stood out to me as like she's got this is Julianne Moore, partially because she only really had like one scene. But I thought that she was great.
It was a very subtle performance.
Yeah, Julianne Moore is great. She's looking terrific. So yeah, the acting didn't work for me. I thought the dialogue was just not good. It was very on the nose. It was corny.
There was one moment that really drove me crazy where um Amy Adams is going like, "Where's my phone? Where's my phone?" saying it out loud. It's like,
Yeah.
did you need to say that? Like, as I said in the other review, like, listen, if you just showed her clearly in a panic searching for something and then she finds her phone, I think we'll piece it together.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of dialogue like that. And then of course at the end where we get the reveal that Ethan, who is the son of the new neighbors living across the road, who she has developed a friendship with, he's the murderer. And he just comes in and I imagine this was one of the reshoots. He just comes in and just starts monologuing, completely explains the whole film as though he was looking straight into the camera. And also they did set up this thing in the movie that he's got an allergy to the cat. Did they ever pay that off? I don't think they did.
Oh no,
It was
that
just
that
like
went out of
there.
nowhere. Yeah. They could have done something with that. No, they probably would have given it away. If I was thinking of like if she just heard like a lone sneeze somewhere in the house, but that might have given it away even more than they did. I was messaging you kind of throughout, kind of trying to guess the twist and stuff. Because here's what I thought. I put way more thought into this apparently than than the writers did. Because I really thought that they were trying, for some reason I got the vibe that they were really gonna try to do like almost like a Shyamalan kind of like rug pull, and it was
Right.
gonna be something way bigger than it was. So I thought there was gonna be an A plot and a B plot. The A plot being what's actually happening, her doing the rear window thing of, oh, my neighbors are murderers across the street. Right off the bat for that A plot, even though I didn't message you, I think it was pretty obvious that it wasn't Gary Oldman. Like when
Yeah.
we saw Julianne Moore get murked, um, they filmed it in a way where the person was clearly obstructed, and Gary Oldman was just so over the top villainous
Yeah.
that it's like it's not him. It's clearly the weird teenager. So that was kind of lame. And I messaged you being like, "Oh, dude, I got it. It's gonna be a Jacob's Ladder scenario. It's so obvious." That wasn't the situation. That wasn't the case, which is simultaneously good because you can't top Jacob's Ladder, but at the same time,
I don't know. Did you see the remake?
no. I watched your review and I steered clear.
Smart.
Yes.
That's being a good consumer.
Always trust Court. But what was it gonna say?
Jacob's Ladder.
Jacob's Ladder. Yeah, I kind of wish that it went into some area, just some goofy area, because the Ethan thing was so goofy that at some point I was watching with my wife, and I was like, you know what? As stupid as this would be, I hope it turns into like a David Fincher's The Game scenario. Have you seen The Game?
Yeah, love it.
So where I was like, it's gonna be stupid, but I would be all for it if this movie was just like everything that happened was just a prank being pulled on Amy Adams' character to help her get over her agoraphobia. That would be ridiculous. That would be stupid. But I would be like, at least it did something, because at the end of it, it was just straightforward. Just Ethan's the bad guy, and he does this dumb monologuing that would have, pissed off Syndrome from The Incredibles.
Right.
Yeah, man, it's weird. It's a weird mess of a movie.
Well, and they spend a lot of time trying to make we the audience think that maybe this is entirely in her head because she is on this new medication and she's drinking, so maybe she's hallucinating. And I would have been more into that as a fan of like psychological thrillers. It pretty much just turns into a slasher movie in the final act. Like,
oh yeah,
she's just running through the house and he's just coming after her. It's just like it became goofy and silly. And then somehow she had this like crazy agoraphobia, and then she is almost murdered, and then she's fine and she's just not agoraphobic anymore.
See,
that came out of nowhere.
Yeah, the way to get over your anxiety disorders from a traumatic incident is to have an even more traumatic incident. And that they just kind of negate each other. Yeah, man. That's what's annoying, is that I think that the trope of having an unreliable narrator can work, but you have to start off. You don't have to do anything, but I think that it helps if you start off with at least a bit of reliability from them. You have to start from a place of where you can feel like you can initially trust this character and you care for this character, and then when their reality starts to become nebulous, then you really kind of feel that sinking feeling in your stomach of like, oh shit, this person may not be all together, like I don't know if I can trust him. But right from the beginning, you can't trust Amy Adams' character. She's already shown taking meds and drinking and just having weird lapses in memory, and so from right off the bat, it's just like, I'm not taking anything that's happening at face value. So there was no tension. I didn't care, I wasn't like on the edge of my seat. For a thriller, I didn't care what was going to happen next. I didn't care for the characters when there's the big emotional reveal that she killed Captain America and her daughter in the car crash. I felt nothing. Like, there was a whole scene of her clutching her dead daughter's body, and I was just nothing. Just felt nothing.
I will say the scene in the car with her and Anthony Mackie, I liked that scene. I thought they both played it well. I thought it was a nice, quiet little interlude to sort of transition us from second act to third. I thought it looked really nice, and it was cool how they went into it, because she's having her I'm not crazy moment with detectives Abbott and Costello, and and then you just hear the one detective off camera say, "Your family is dead," and it kind of comes out of nowhere. I thought that was a cool moment, and then we see the flashback, and then there was that moment where she like looks off to the other room of the house, and in that room is the car crash and the snow coming down. Like, I thought visually that was fantastic.
Mm.
That
Yeah,
worked for
no,
you at all, or
the visual did.
okay?
That whole monologue leading up to it, I was cracking up, and I honestly giggled when from the corner she's just ranting and it's like, your family's dead. I was like,
Yeah,
yeah, no shit. I mean, like, I nothing was surprising, and I thought it was delivered super cornily. I laughed during that moment. Like I said, I thought the visual of the car in the house was kind of cool. uh it's reminiscent of another Jacob's Ladder movie called Stay. I think it's called Stay. It's a movie with Ryan Gosling that
okay.
nobody saw, but it's a very similar situation. And they did things like that where um someone's memory was kind of like breaking through their world. So like shit like that, where an overturned car would be just in their living room.
Hmm.
Cool imagery. This movie was shot by a great cinematographer, Bruno Debanel. He's done a lot of great things. Um, so I
Well,
agree that
and sorry, let
okay.
me just jump in quickly.
Mhm.
Um, the part like you said where it's like your family's dead. That actually reminded me of a moment in Jacob's Ladder. I don't know if you'll remember it, but there's a moment where, and if you guys haven't seen Jacob's Ladder, for the love of goat, do
Mm.
it. It's so
Yeah,
good.
it's fantastic.
But there's a moment where um he's like reconciling with his old family and his ex-wife, and it's
Mhm.
like this really nice moment, and then this disembodied voice out of nowhere just goes like, dream on, and then he like comes out of it, and it's really freaky. So that actually really kind of reminded me, but it didn't work as well.
It was, but yeah, it's similar in kind of on paper, I could see, but just the execution was just so strange because, like I said, everything just felt like it was camp. And that whole sequence where like the lights were coming down behind her, and she's just like, "Oh, if I were so blah, 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 blah," and she was just launching into this corny monologue, and then just like, your family's dead," and then they do a whip pan to the abbot of a detective, and she's like, your family's dead. I that I don't know. Just that's also a great moment of how I felt a lot of this was, where it just everything just felt like, what is the tone? What is the tone of this? This isn't a thriller. It's not suspenseful. It's not dramatic. It's not funny intentionally. It's not goofy. I don't know what the fuck you're going for, Joe Wright. And it's just bad. And also, I to talk about the visuals, I thought they were sporadically really good. I mean, like I said, Bruno De Banel is a great cinematographer, but in this one, I think again it was just a mixture of um, kind of the direction from Joe Wright, where there were some shots that were really great, and they had this repeating kind of imagery of overlaying some of the older films that Amy Adams was watching kind of behind her over her while she was sleeping. So there's some really striking imagery there, and some good camera work too when action was happening. Like there's a moment where Gary Oldman slaps his kid, slaps the shit out of his kid,
Oh, yeah.
and quickly the camera kind of it follows his movement, and it kind of winds up with him. So when he gets slapped, you really just bam, you really feel it. And there was stuff like that where I thought was kind of cool. So it has an energy, but at the same
And
time,
I
okay.
also really like, sorry, the there's a moment where she sets her phone up and she's making basically a last will and testament because she's decided she's going to commit suicide.
Uh-huh.
And the way they shoot that, so it's kind of like a long shot with her in the background, but you also see the phone in the foreground. That was really cool. I thought that was a
Yeah.
cool visual. But anyway, sorry,
Yeah,
go
no,
on.
it's a cool two shot essentially of, yeah, showing what the phone's recording as well as keeping her in focus in the background. So yeah, there are good shots. But at the same time, there are other times where the framing I thought was just strange, like especially during that scene where she's kind of realizing that or remembering that her family's dead. The way that everybody was framed, it felt very stagey. It felt very like we're on a community theater stage. The way that
Hmm.
everyone is aligned, and it just everyone was saying their lines and hitting their marks like we're in a stage production. I don't know. It's just strange to me. So yeah, even the visuals didn't really save it for me. And also, I mentioned this in the chat that it had a bit, not a lot, but it had a bit of like a Dario Argento or Mario Bava esque feel to it, a lot to the aesthetics. The most, even if you haven't seen it, Dario Argento made Suspiria, and that's really what it reminded me of. There's one shot in particular where Julianne Moore is getting stabbed, and it's kind of like a smash. It's like a smash zoom, a crash zoom into her face, screaming, and then superimposed over it is like this bright red blood splatter.
Right.
That's very 1960s, 1970s Italian horror, where it's just very like colorful and over the top. And so that's another thing. It just felt like what, again, what are you going for? Are you going for old school Hitchcock, or are you going for Dario Argento? Like,
Right.
what is your inspiration? I don't know.
So you would not recommend this film then?
No, absolutely not. It does it how do I say it? It commits the cardinal sin of um don't invoke a better movie in your movie, if that
Right.
makes any sense.
Yeah.
Where in this one was overloaded, where it's like, hey, it's Rear Window, hey, it's Laura, it's Out of the Past, there's so many references to other movies that it's like I would just rather be watching any of those, because this is not offering me anything new. It's not doing anything new. It's not terrible. There's the dialogue is not the worst thing I've heard. It's not terrible acting. It just feels uh it feels unrefined, and it feels like it's kind of aimless. Everything
Right.
just feels aimless, and it seems like everybody's just like, what do we do? That's a good shot. Okay, cool. Well, that was a good line delivery. Okay, cool. And it doesn't amount to anything.
And I think a word that you used that was bang on was uneven. I mean, the tone shifts so much in this movie. Like, so much of it is just on Amy Adams by herself in her house, and it's sort of quiet and it's pensive. And then again, that final act is full on slasher, goofy. Yeah, it's really all over the place.
Rooftop fight in the rain, like
Right.
that feels like a 90s kind of thrill. I don't know, it reminded me of what's that one with the hook, like I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Yeah.
It just didn't it just kind of feel like every generic kind of thriller or slasher movie from the 90s, that kind of finale.
Yeah.
Where, oh man,
I should point out, I saw that movie on my first date ever.
did you really?
Yes, I
Oh
did.
man, dude, go watch that instead, guys, because that at least has like a bit of 90s camp and
Yeah.
charm. I rewatched that just about last year, like when the pandemic hit. I just wanted some comfort food as in form of movies. So watching a good 90s flick is great because it has the 90s charm, but watching a 90s-esque thriller in 2021, made in 2021, it's not good. But what about you? I want to know, would you actually recommend this movie, or do you think that the finale just makes it null and void?
So this is the conundrum I ran into on the
Okay.
spoiler-free review. I kind of said at the end, like, so would I recommend this movie? I don't know. I said I would recommend the first two acts of the movie because they're shot really well and I think they're acted really well. But then you're going to want to know what happens. So you're going to finish it, and then you're going to be mad at me for making you watch the end of it. So I don't know. Probably not.
Guys, if you do watch the first 2/3, you can probably end it, because I don't think you're going to be surprised by where it goes.
Particularly after watching this spoiler-filled review.
Yeah, good thing that I gave that disclaimer after it. But were you am I crazy? Did you also peg, or like, oh, it's Ethan, it's the kid? Was your mind also going there? Or
I had my first thing was that it's definitely not Gary Oldman, because that would just be too obvious.
Yeah.
I was very curious about who Julianne Moore was. Is she actually the mom? Is she, I started picking up that it was probably going to be the kid, just because they went out of their way to make him the most gentle, kind. It just, like, that felt like a very obvious red herring to me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, where it's like, I guess even if you can't guess like this specific path, it's like none of the options that are laid out is going to be that surprising. Like it I don't think there's any way that like anybody's going to be like, what?
Right.
It was this guy. I don't know. But what went wrong, man? I don't, like I said, with Joe Wright, such a talented director. What do you where do you think this went wrong?
I honestly don't know. I don't. I think it was kind of like just a perfect storm. And the
Yeah.
interesting thing is like, because I've read a lot of reviews of the novel, and people seem to really think the novel's really really good.
Mhm.
So then I started thinking, okay, so they probably like veered really far off from the plot of the novel.
Uh-huh.
Read it, it's like identical. So it's just, I don't know if something was just lost in translation from page to screen.
Mhm.
I don't know
Th-
what happened, but it didn't
I
work.
yeah, I wonder if there was a weird like monologue from the kid at the end.
Yeah, I'd be curious. I'm actually kind of curious to read it now
Yeah,
after seeing what this movie kind of became.
because I could see the story working as like a, I guess it would be more straightforward, but if you just kept the tone serious throughout, and I don't know, I think it would have been something, but
Right.
I don't know. But then again, it's not as though this movie didn't take itself seriously. It just had it just had like a weird tinge. It had like a weird like aftertaste in every scene of like, this feels performative. It like nothing feels really 100% genuine the way that this is not a fair comparison, but let's say Gone Girl. So Gone Girl, like that, it has some moments of levity as well, but it's like that also has some great moments of tension and just like in dread. And when it gets serious, it gets freaking serious.
Right.
And I know not everyone is David Fincher, but I don't know. I don't know. Not everyone's David Fincher. That's my thought,
It's true.
apparently.
That's a hot take. Actually, I think that's a perfect place to end the show today.
Mhm.
So thanks for being here. We want to thank all you guys for watching. Of course, we would love to encourage you to hit the like button. It does help this show get out there to more people. It helps the channel grow. Of course, if you haven't subscribed, ring the bell so you can see all that. Of course, jump into the comments. Let us know what you think about these topics. Did you like The Woman in the Window? Again, I read all the comments. I respond to them as much as I can. So don't think you're going unheard. So we want to thank you guys for watching. Chris, as always, and of course, if you want the audio version of this podcast, check Google Podcasts, check Spotify. There are a few others right now and more coming. So that's available as well. Chris, where can people follow you online?
On Instagram, my handle is Art of Light and Shadow. It's a fun daily film blog that I do of every movie that I'm watching, ranging from movies like The Woman in the Window to actually good movies. No, from everything from kind of like obscure kind of foreign films to really some kind of popular things. It's really interesting. Slowly growing the community there and trying to be more interactive with everyone. So take a look. It's a great time.
Right on. And if you guys want to check out Andris's work, of course, he wasn't here today. He should be back next week. Go on YouTube and do a search for Cheap Thrills, Unspeakable Terror. He reviews sort of horror and sci-fi B movies from, I believe, as he puts it, the dawn of cinema to the modern era. They're short, they're to the point, they're fun. And he kind of sounds like Rod Serling, which is just cool. And of course, you can follow me here on my YouTube channel or on Instagram and Twitter at Courtshake. Go and give me a follow. It'll be fun. So that is the show. Again, we want to thank you guys for watching, and we will see you next week. Same bad time, same bad channel.
Have a good one, everyone.
Take
Later.
care, everybody.